So we just recently did a video on the 10 terrible albums by artists that I love. And this was just part of a thread that was going around and we kind of jumped on board and a lot of people seem to at least find the video interesting. Got a lot of comments and a lot of good conversations going and one of the comments suggested, why don't we do a part 2, Electric Boogaloo? And yeah, here it is. Part 2. Or should we say, even more terrible albums by artists that I love. Hey guys, welcome to Amity Tracks. And here's 10 more. 10 more terrible albums, in my opinion at least, by artists that I love. So let's get right into it. And just like the previous video, no particular order. We're just going to talk about them. And I didn't take the easy route. There's some artists that I truly love that I talked about in the first video. I could do multiple albums from those artists, but no. These are 10 new artists that were not addressed in the first video. So, who else do I love? I love Genesis. Love Genesis. I think one of the greatest progressive rock bands ever. And I'm even a fan of a lot of their, kind of later, more pop-oriented material. So what album am I going to pick? A lot of you guys might suspect Invisible Touch, but no, not Invisible Touch. I actually don't mind Invisible Touch. It's for what it's trying to do, which is basically, hit the pop jugular. I think they do a fine job with that, and I don't mind pop music if it's done well. I think that one's done fairly well. No. The Genesis album that I really dislike is this one, We Can't Dance. I think this is terrible. This, at least with Invisible Touch, I think there's undeniable hooks and melodies, even if you're not into what they're trying to do. This is just this blanket of blandness, and sort of some cringy, Jesus, he knows me, taking on, TV preachers. Okay, it's about as easy target as there can be. I Can't Dance, I think, is kind of cheeseball. The whole second half of this, I find just really dull. Kind of that sort of vanilla. Although I like vanilla, but musically speaking, vanilla. Phil Collins sort of ballad type stuff. Yeah, the only song I like Driving the Last Spike, which is like 10 minutes. It's like one of those 10, even in their pop years, they've kind of tried to at least have one or two of these longer pieces, harkening back a little bit to a progressive past. But even the first half of that song is really boring. So it's not when it starts kind of getting going in the second half. I think that's pretty good. All right. What's next? This guy. Really admire this guy. This is one of the most talented individuals in rock history. But he has put out some pretty bad records. Talking about Steve Winwood. I mean, from, Traffic and Blind Faith, even some experimental stuff like Go. All that stuff is awesome. I'm a fan of some of his solo work too. A lot of people find his solo career somewhat disappointing. I like. Well, Arc of a Diver, I think, is brilliant. I'm a big fan of this. Back in the High Life, for kind of an '80s pop record, I think this is as good as that genre can get, really. And in the wake of the huge success of Back in the High Life, if I remember right, I think he re-signed, renewed a contract for like a huge amount, and then put this out. Roll with it from 1988. This is not good. I do not like this at all. Here, I gotta hold up like this because the song titles are written down here. The title track, which was, I guess a hit of some sort, I think is just, man, it's just sort of like in your sleep you could do that, Steve. Um, yeah, put on your dancing shoes. It's just, yeah, there's two. The morning side, I think, is kind of a nice moody tune. I like that one. Don't you know what the night can do, which was sort of a secondary, not quite as big hit, which I think is all right. But other than that, I think this is a really bad record. And he continued to put out pretty bad records. That was '88 throughout the '90s. He's sort of more recently, I think, regained some of his mojo. And the last few records are really good, but he had a stretch there where it was bad. Now this next one is almost not fair because this next one was released almost like intentionally as a bad record, but it's infamously bad, and it's a good story. I've told this story before, but I'll tell it briefly again. And I do love this band. I love every other record they put out. But Creedence Clearwater Revival's Mardi Gras, aka Fogerty's Revenge. So they were down to a trio here for this last album. Tom Fogerty had finally split, couldn't deal with the dictatorial ways of brother John Fogerty. And the other two guys, Stu Cook and Doug Clifford, were basically, I think, somewhat reasonably asking John, like, hey, could we maybe contribute a little bit more? We've been both writing some songs. Maybe we could get a few songs on the record. Could we, contribute more? And John didn't take that very well. I mean, John Fogerty's position was basically, we've had a ton of success doing it the way we've been doing it. So why rock the boat here? But I think John Fogerty was sort of ready to bolt anyway and go his own way. But man, he left us with a doozy because what John said, he's like, okay, fine, guys. You want a democracy? We'll have a democracy. I will write a third of the songs. Doug will write a third of the songs. Stu will write a third of the songs. Not only that, each of us will sing lead vocals on our songs, and I will only play rhythm guitar on your songs, not lead. You want it split three ways? We're going to split it three ways. I don't think that's quite what Doug and Stu had in mind. Yeah, and the results are sometimes embarrassing. I actually think Doug Clifford's all right vocally. Stu shouldn't be singing lead. Um, but yeah, you take John Fogerty's songs and put them up against these two guys, it's just a different level. I mean, because John Fogerty's a songwriter, different level from most human beings. That's. But yeah, so like I said, it's almost unfair because this was almost on purpose to be a bad record to prove John's point. All right, here now, this is a band that started out brilliantly. Their debut record, Devo, Q Are We Not Men, A We Are Devo. 5-star, brilliant. I want to do a whole deep dive episode on that record. What followed immediately is not as brilliant, but still really creative and interesting. I like Duty Now for the Future. I like Freedom of Choice. I like New Traditionalists. I think all those are really interesting records. Now with Oh No, It's Devo, you start to see a fairly precipitous drop, although there are still some salvageable things on this record that don't make it a total disaster. But then we get to this. Shout. Shout. This is, you know, when something is so bad, like you wonder what the artist is thinking. Like they have to know this is not good. I mean, they have to. This is so terrible. I don't know. There's one song, actually, there's one song on here I like, but it's a cover. Devo is still kind of doing their de-evolution, sort of deconstructing of cover songs that they've brilliantly done, throughout. And I think it's really interesting cover of Jimi Hendrix's "Are You Experienced?" But that's it. The rest of this stuff is in like the all the original material is unbelievably awful, unbelievably awful. Okay, this next one might be a little hot take. I don't know, because this next one is divides people a lot. There are some people out there who think there's a large group of people out there who love this record, who think it's brilliant. It's like a kind of later career triumph for this group. But then there are a lot of other people out there I've seen who don't get it at all and think it's pretty terrible and actually pretty sad because you know, the genius leader of this band was not in good shape at this time. Put me in that second camp. I don't get it. Hey, in the comments, explain. If you love this album, why is this so great? I seriously, I'm not just trying to argue and whatever. I want to know, like, what the Beach Boys love you. Do they? I find this record kind of sad. The state that Brian is in, Brian Wilson. Uh, I don't get it. Please explain. Now, there's one song I do find. I find Johnny Carson kind of interesting. It's a song called Johnny Carson, and quite literally, you can tell how Brian wrote it because he's like sitting in his bed watching Johnny Carson, and he writes a song just describing what Johnny Carson's doing on TV on the Johnny Carson show. The song, I guess. I find that kind of weird but interesting. Yeah, I don't get it, man. I don't get it. I doubt this next one has too many defenders. I love the Allman Brothers, but man, by the late '70s into the early '80s, they were at the end of their road, and this is the last one they put out, Brothers of the Road, before they split for most of the '80s. Now they would reunite at the very end of the '80s and have this amazing resurgence, starting at the end of the '80s all through the '90s and beyond. They put out great material. They had this kind of late career just renaissance. But at this point, they were done creatively, yeah, and I think they knew it. They like I said, they either broke up or at least took a extended hiatus, after this through most of the '80s. And I think to me they hit the '80s, with issues that a lot of bands have going into the '80s. From the '60s and '70s of that vintage is that they didn't really know how to adjust to that decade. Some bands did, surprisingly, but this group didn't. And I think it was pretty smart of them just to like let's call it quits for a while and sort of rode out the decade, right? All right, what's next? I'm gonna go the Rolling Stones. I love the Stones, and I mean they've been doing this long enough to where they've got to have some stinkers. Yeah, you might expect me to throw out Undercover. I love Undercover. If you guys have watched this channel for a long period of time, know that I'm a staunch defender of Undercover. I'm not even going to put Dirty Work here, which does suck. Bridges to Babylon from, was it 97? 1997. I find this one to be really bad because they don't really know who they want to be. They've got like 50 producers on here. Every song is produced by somebody different almost. Uh, just sort of trying to be modern instead of just being the Stones, and it's overall doesn't really work. The production bothers me. I don't think these are great songs. There's a few of them that are all right. Uh, Saint of Me was okay. Thief in the Night, if I remember, was all right. I think that was one of the Keith Richards ones, right? Anyway, yeah, this one. All righty. two more. I haven't talked about David Bowie. Got to talk about Bowie. Love Bowie, obviously. What you think I was going to give you tonight? I actually kind of like some of tonight. It's got to be Never Let Me Down. No? Never Let Me Down is not good, but at least it's interesting. I mean, it's a failure, but it's an interesting failure. No, to me, Bowie commits the greatest sin when he's boring. He's hardly ever boring. I think he's pretty boring on Hours. Yeah, Hours from, what is it, 1999. Yeah, at least with Tonight and Never Let Me Down, I mean, the failures are kind of interesting. It's almost spectacular in some ways. Here, it's just dull, and Bowie should never be dull. All right. I save the worst for last. This is quite simply one of the worst albums I have ever heard. Now, I did a video on this band a while ago talking about Jefferson Airplane. And I kind of railed on this record in that video too. Yet there was someone in the comments who came to its defense. It just goes to show that there is somebody who loves every record out there, however bad it is. This is one of the worst records I have ever heard. And it is self-titled Jefferson Airplane, their reunion album from 1989. I mean, look at those guys. Just look at them. This is so bad. Just a new level of bad. I mean, 80s production. And I love the 80s. I'm not a basher of the 80s, but it doesn't work for these guys. It's 80s production in all the bad ways, not the innovative, interesting ways. It doesn't suit them. And, this is the original lineup reuniting finally. This should have been this triumphant. Ooh, this is terrible. I give you. Can't believe they put the lyrics in here. Summer of Love. The song Summer of Love, written by Marty Balin. You would think that these guys, someone like Marty Balin, who was, right at the epicenter of that cultural, the late 60s, would have something really interesting and profound to say, sort of looking back on the 60s, that whole experience. Here's what he has to say in Summer of Love. The summer of love was something special. We were so young and so free. The summer of love that I was a part of, we had so many dreams. And even a few of them came true, it seems. I still believe in all the music, and it's still playing. I still believe in all the words. Yeah, I'm still saying. I still believe in all the people. They were really great. And I get to thinking back to where we all once were. The summer of love had special people. Everybody was together, it seemed. Anyway, in the comments, you guys unloaded in the comments of the first video here of terrible albums by artists you love. But if you got some more, let's keep talking. Let's keep going in these comments. Let's keep going. Anyway, thanks for watching, guys. Hope you did enjoy. These are fun videos to do. We will move on to something else, but I did have 10 more I think we could go through. So anyway, please do subscribe to the channel. If you haven't already, we really appreciate it. Like the videos, share the videos, all that stuff really helps us out. And we'll see you next time on Amity Tracks.